Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see everyone this morning. Go ahead and turn to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. This morning we're talking about spiritual prenup. Spiritual prenup. I guess before we do that, we're going to have to talk a little bit about a prenuptial agreement. What is a prenuptial agreement? This is defined quite a number of ways. One of the ways that it is defined as is a legal contract entered into before marriage that outlines how finances and property will be divided in the event of divorce or death. Okay? Another way to define a prenuptial agreement or a prenup is a premarital agreement or prenup is a contract entered into prior to marriage setting the terms for separation. Now, there's a lot of discussion that can be had about a prenup before a couple gets married. There can be a lot of discussions about a prenup during marriage as well. But I do want to take a second to look at just some of the things that often happen because of a prenup that is found in marriage. And I'm not here to regale you about the certain wisdom or knowledge of you entering into one of those or handling one of those. That is a different topic that we can handle later. But something that we can naturally see as a result of a prenup is it is insidious. Insidious. That's another word that we may not be using all the time, but it's a word that I think perfectly describes what often a prenup may do. Insidious is the idea that there's something that's there underneath poisoning something, undermining it, breaking it apart from within, if you will. And it's not necessarily just the idea of an agreement. It is, of course, its existence itself in a relationship, because what a prenup does in a relationship is, again, as we've talked about it, it's this contract that's going along with this other contract of marriage, if you will. And it's a contract that what's going to happen with our finances, with our property, in the event of divorce. And what that is saying, most likely, of course, people are using that in terms of divorce, not of death, but in terms of divorce. And what's going on most likely is that there's this idea, there's this sense that this may not work out. That this isn't going to last. That this isn't going to be what we're about to stand before God and do and proclaim that we're going to be one and we're going to make sure that it's going to work out. That's the nature of a prenuptial agreement. That's what it just innately does to a person's heart, to a couple's heart. I have often seen this, maybe you have seen this as well. But we want to take that and we really want to apply it also to a spiritual context. Okay? Now, through this lesson, some of the things that we're talking about this morning can no doubt apply to other relationships, and hopefully well within those other relationships they can be strengthened through what we're talking about this morning. But I do want to take some time to talk about how a prenup in a spiritual sense can affect the Christian as well. Now, when you and I become Christians, as you know, there's not like this other contract that we're signing with God or with anyone else that says, okay, in case this doesn't work out, I sort of want to keep all of the blessings, right? Like, I don't want to believe in you. I don't want to keep going to church. I might want to deconstruct, if you will. I want to go away from that. But I still want to keep the idea or the hope, if you will, that what I'm doing is right and correct. That maybe by giving this lesson to the church, that me leaving is sort of this lesson, if you will, and I can still keep the sort of blessings that you promise to Christians when I die. You often see this attitude in those who have deconstructed from Christianity and those who have thought to themselves, well, you know what? What the church is doing is something I don't like, something I don't accept. Maybe I might find something else better elsewhere, but I also still have this idea, this offhanded idea that I still want the blessings that God offers. And something I want us to look at is found in Hebrews chapter 12, because we really want to not just understand the motives behind an agreement well within ourselves that says maybe this isn't going to work out for me. Maybe what God has promised, okay, I'm hearing all of that, but everything else I'm not accepting, whatever it is. Maybe somebody's looking at some part of their agreement with the Lord now that they're in Christ, and they're thinking, this might not be working out. This isn't what I'm expecting. I didn't think it was going to go like this. And if somebody is thinking about those things, those are some of the things that you and I, especially as a church, need to tackle, need to handle. And if it's not you, these are some of the things that you can help other people with as well. I've asked you to turn to Hebrews chapter 12. We're going to look in verse 14 here. The Hebrew writer saying, strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. And we'll stop there. And so what we're seeing here from this Hebrew writer, you already recognize, you can recognize Hebrews 11, going into Hebrews 12, all of this speaking about being faithful, remaining as a group, acting as one in God's church. Understand that there are going to be times when people are not at peace within themselves. And when they are not at peace with themselves, that unrest, if you will spill out onto others and to those who are around them. When they are not at peace with themselves, they're not so particularly looking at the holiness that they ought to have in the Lord. They're looking at the world. They're looking at what it offers. They're looking at all of these things out here. And so the Hebrew writer gives this strict warning. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God. And brethren, that is our goal this morning. We want to make sure that everyone is going to obtain the grace of God. And one of the ways in which that happens is exactly the way in which this Hebrew writer says here. Make sure that no root of bitterness springs up, causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. That goes back to that idea of insidiousness. There's something that's there, that's sitting there, this unrest, if you will, that's not doing well within their soul, that's not doing well within their heart. They feel like they need to do something about it. They feel like they need to throw off everything that I've been doing or everything that I've seen with the Lord, and I need to go somewhere else. I need to do something else. Turn now to John chapter 6. What I want us to do is I want us to look at this scenario that's happening in John chapter 6 and understand a little bit about the heart of a person who might have this sort of prenuptial agreement in their heart. I've agreed to be with Christ. I've agreed to do what he said, but there's something in me that's like, this may not work out. This may not be what I'm expecting. And so we want to not only highlight some of those things, but we also want to find ways and talk about ways in which we can make sure we're becoming as faithful as possible. Now, in John chapter 6, just a little bit of context here. Jesus had fed 5,000 people. He had fed thousands of people. And after feeding thousands of people, he goes off. He crosses over a certain area. The people are looking for him because they're all like, oh man, that was pretty great. They find him, and in their minds they're thinking, hey, this guy's going to give us some more bread. He's going to give us some more food. He tells them this entire situation about don't be just out here looking for the bread of the earth, if you will. You need to be trying to seek for the bread that comes down from heaven. And he's talking about himself, right? And so he's like, you need to be really trying to seek me for what I'm offering you, and not physical food here, but what I'm offering you spiritually and your relationship with God. That's what I'm here to offer you. Okay? But these people, they're thinking about other things. So Jesus doubles down and he starts explaining more and more about spiritual things, but because they're so earthly minded, they're not able to understand those things. And so as he keeps going, they start turning away. They start turning away. They start not listening to all of these things, about eating you and partaking of you and doing this. What does all of that mean? So we're going to pick up in verse 60 of John chapter 6, and we're going to make some sense of that. When many of his disciples heard it, they said, this is a hard saying. Who can listen to it? But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples were grumbling about this, said to them, Do you take offense at this? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh is no help at all. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus knew from the beginning who those who did not believe, and who it was who would betray him. And he said, "This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him by my Father." After this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. So Jesus said to the 12, "Do you want to go away as well?" Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God." Jesus answered them, "Did I not choose you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil." He spoke of Judas, the son of Simon of Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was going to betray him. And we'll stop there. This is a very deep and interesting story and scenario that's happening here between Jesus and his disciples. And we hear that this is mainly between Jesus and his disciples. We're not dealing with the Pharisees here, the Sadducees who are turning away. This is an in-house issue. This is an in-house issue. He's dealing with his own disciples here. And one of the first things that I want us to recognize as we're talking about a spiritual prenup, something that might be insidious in our hearts, that's driving us away from God, is the question that Jesus asks these people. Look at verse 61 again. But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples were grumbling about this. What were they grumbling about? Well, they were grumbling about all of the things that Jesus has been talking about. They've been grumbling about all of these things in terms of him coming from heaven and what he's here to establish and what he's here to do. And they're like, yeah, I mean, we can hear some of these other things, but we're really more interested about some of that food you gave us earlier. You can keep talking, but feed us, while you're doing that. But Jesus is really trying to hamper down. Don't be putting all of this trust in the flesh. Don't be concerned about just filling up your stomach. You've got something else to fill. Okay, you've got something else that you need to focus on. Of course, and they're not accepting too much of that. And they're like, okay, we're hearing what you're saying about yourself, but I don't know about that. But look at this question he asked. Do you take offense at this? Do you take offense at this? This is something that you often hear a lot, whether online, maybe in person sometimes, where people are like, you know what, this is what I don't like about Christianity. Hey, you know what, when I was reading through the Old Testament, this is what I don't like about God. Hey, when I was reading this in Psalms, this is what I don't like about David, or this is what I don't like about whoever else, right? You'll often hear about these particular things that people will take offense at. Now, it's not wrong, per se, to feel sort of offended about some of the things that the Bible says, or even about some of the things that Jesus himself will say. But if we take that so far to say, well, I'm so offended that I'm just going to turn away and I'm not going to deal with it anymore, remember, we're not talking about unbelievers here. We're not talking about Pharisees here. We're talking about his disciples. They already know Jesus. They've already been talking with him. They've already been following him. And so it's not just that crowd that met him earlier. These are part of the people who were baptized by some of his apostles earlier, by some of his disciples, and they've been following Jesus. Okay? So it's not like anything that Jesus is saying is so particularly new to them, but when they're trying to make sense of it and it's not making sense, they're all like, you know what, I got to get up out of here. And one of the first things that you and I want to be warned of as well in our hearts are the things that we might take offense of. Okay? That's one of those things that are really going to drive up this sort of like, I don't have an agreement anymore with God because I'm having an offense with something else. And you'll often hear people say, well, look at the justice of God back in the Old Testament. Look how he killed all of those people. How do you make sense of God killing all of those people? And they're thinking that because that happened over there in that Old Testament during those times, that now I need to be applying that to Jesus and to what God is telling me now. Of course, they're missing the complete context of those situations. They don't know those people. They don't know what's going on. They don't know the nature of sin. And yet they want to make the judgment of God and say, well, I don't like what God was doing back then. I take offense to that. And they will hold that in their hearts and not look at that any further. They won't study that any further. They're not going to look at it from God's perspective. In fact, they disregard God's perspective. They say, you know what, I don't want to listen to God about what he has to do back then. I think it's wrong. And they're going to overstep God's actions, God's reasoning, and think that their reasoning should override God. And brethren, this is what we often do sometimes when we are offended by certain things. And that's why you and I have to be careful in our hearts to make sure that if something is offending me, I don't just need to say, oh, well, you know what, I just don't like that. And I don't deal with it, and I don't talk about it. No, I probably need to talk about it. How long has the Word of God been there? You already know it. It's been there. Is it going to change? Is it going to be different because I get offended at it? Is it going to turn into something else? Is it going to am I going to just make it sound better? What did the disciples here needed to do? Jesus understood that they were grumbling in themselves about something, that something was sitting in their hearts insidiously, making them starting to doubt him. And so he asked. He doesn't hide away from it. And I think that's another thing people need to recognize here. God does not hide away from the things that you might take offense at. But he deals with them head on. Okay? He deals with them head on. And this is what people need to understand about God as well. God knows and understands the things you might take offense at, but he's not going to hide away from them. He's not going to shrink from them. He's going to deal with them head on with you. Okay? And we want to tell people, we want to show people that that's the God you believe in. That's the God you're serving. You might find offense at something, and that offense might cause this root of bitterness, if you will, but God's ready to deal with it head on, face on. So give him the chance to do that. Jesus, as we're told here, knowing in himself that his disciples were grumbling about this, again, grumbling about the things that were said, then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? Okay? Now, they've already recognized him as the Son of Man. He's already claimed to be the Son of Man. They've agreed that he is the Son of Man to some extent. Again, we're talking about his disciples. So he's saying, hey, I get it. You're taking offense at that, but that does not undermine everything else that I'm here for. Okay? Just because you're taking offense at one part doesn't undermine everything else that I'm doing. You understand? That's part of what Jesus is saying here. He's saying you're going to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before. Remember, you recognize me as the Son of Man. Okay? And we remember that after his resurrection and after some time, he ascends. And there are some disciples who are able to see him ascending into heaven. So he's telling them, like, hey, if you continue to follow me, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see me ascending into heaven. So even though you're taking offense at some of the things I'm saying now, don't let that undermine everything else that I'm doing. And don't we often see that, brethren? When people who are having doubts, when people are having some doubts, they might just focus in on that one thing that causes offense, and they'll say, everything else doesn't matter anymore. Why do I need to care about anything else? Why do I need to be concerned about my church, right? And you'll often hear this, and you'll often see this as well. And this is why, brethren, again, we've got to be facing these things head on. Because there are some things that people today will take offense at, and it's not up to us to say, well, you shouldn't do that. Well, they do. So what do we do about it? Well, we go to them head on, just like Jesus here, and then we also remind them, just because you're taking offense at one part doesn't mean you should undermine everything else. One of the things I've been surprised about whenever somebody is getting ready to leave the church, or that they do indeed leave the church because they stop believing in some part of the Bible or something, is how, again, they treat all of the Christians they come to know and grow up with like they're nothing, like chopped liver, if you will. I shouldn't say that. Some of y'all might like chopped liver. But, often you'll see them just treat them like nothing. Act as if they're imaginary. Like they're not real people. And you're like, well, what's going on here? Did we not have a relationship? Can we not talk about this? Let's discuss these things. But they're taking one part of the Bible that they might find offense at, and they're all like, I'm just throwing everything away. I'm going to throw the church away. I'm going to throw God away. And I'm like, I think that's an overreaction. I think that's an overreaction. I think the way that the disciples who are dealing with Jesus here are also overreacting. Because we're told that some of them don't follow him anymore after that. It's not like, okay, let me go home, let me think about this, right? Give me some time, let me mull this over, and let's talk about this some more. They're like, no, I'm not going to follow you anymore. That's what we're told. That's an overreaction, brethren. Now you think about that in terms of your marriage, all right? And it's unfortunate that there are some marriages that are out here that are like that. One thing happens, and it may not be a small thing. It may to that person seem like a very big thing, but they're going to allow that one thing to override their entire relationship and say, well, I'm throwing everything out. I'm throwing everything away. Would you call that a good marriage? Would you call that people who are actually focused and remember the vows that they made? No, I wouldn't. I would say that that's an overreaction. When you come into a covenant with the Lord, when you come into a covenant with God, you've got to understand that there are going to be things that you don't understand. Let me say that again. You've got to understand that there are going to be things that you don't understand. That's just the nature of it. Okay? Not everybody has all of the answers. But the beauty about this is that we can keep searching and looking and trying to gain those answers, right? Now we know exactly what we need to do in order to be saved, but there are some questions people might have about the Bible's past, some history or this and that, or what does my walk with Jesus actually look like, and what the church is supposed to be doing, and we can answer all of those things together. That shouldn't be an issue. But if we find ourselves thinking like, well, you know what, I'm ready to just throw everything away, we need to recognize that as an overreaction. And honestly, we need to recognize that as silly, right? I think as people mature, and as you grow in your relationship, you start to think about the silly things you used to get mad at. You ever done that? You ever just like, oh man, you remember when I used to get mad at this? You remember when that thing like really got on my nerves? And now it's like, why did I make that a big deal? You often see that in marriages. You also see that in friendships. I remember, growing up in college, had my boy Tori, whatnot. He was having some relationship issues and this and that. And I told him, and me and this other guy, we were all like, well, you need to get out of here. You need to go to a different dorm or something like that. And we eventually ended up kicking this guy out and whatnot. But I regret that now, And I've been regretting it ever since. It's like, why did we do that? Why were we so self-righteous that we just threw everything out? Right? And this is something that people who are struggling with any root of bitterness, that's what they've got to face with as well. You may be overreacting to some of these things. You may be just coming to a point where you're all like, I'm having questions. I may not be getting the answers I'm wanting, but that doesn't mean you need to throw out everything. Okay? And we want to encourage them of that. Don't throw out everything. And in fact, as you grow, you should recognize the silliness of thinking, I should throw everything out just because I'm having some confusion here. But I do want to be clear that it is often because of confusion or maybe some type of uncertainty that we start to think or that we start to feel that, well, this isn't going to work out, right? And so we all understand that. Like when there's uncertainty in your life, you're like, oh man, I don't know, I'm starting to doubt. I don't know what's going to go on. I don't know what's going to happen. Things like that happen. But because there is uncertainty, doesn't necessarily mean we should give up on our entire covenant relationship with the Lord. Just like you shouldn't give up on your marriage just because there's some bit of uncertainty in your marriage. Just like you wouldn't give up on your friendships just because there's some bit of uncertainty there. How much more should you not give up on your covenant relationship with God because of some uncertainty there? Did these disciples here have some uncertainty? Oh yeah, definitely. Did they overreact by saying, well, I'm just not going to deal with it anymore? Yeah, I think that's an overreaction. So you and I need to be aware of that as well. As Jesus says here, it is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh is no help at all. The words I have spoken to you are spirit and life. He's telling them right now, I am helping you. I am going to help you understand these things. I'm going to help you grasp these things. I'm going to help you gain the Spirit and have the life that you need in order to be right before God. Okay? But don't just throw all of that off because you're taking offense at some of the things I'm saying. Stay with it. Stick with it. Remain faithful. This is the test of everyone. This is the test of every last single Christian. And this is one of the things we want to remind people as well. If there's some root of bitterness that's coming up, listen, you're always going to have some questions. You're always going to need to know something more. But you need to remain faithful. You need to remain faithful. Okay? Because the presence of uncertainty and the presence of problems and the presence of issues does not mean I need to throw out my faith. Sometimes that's how the math is mathing in a person's head and in their heart, but that doesn't, of course, make sense on paper. You've made an agreement with the Lord that you're going to believe in Him. He understands that agreement to go all the way to the very end. Plain and simple. And so that means you and I have to determine that we're going to stick with God to the very end. That's what He's talking about here. Because He's going to give them life. He's going to give them the Spirit. Continue with Him so that you can do this. Of course, one of the main things of the Spirit of God is that He would help them to understand all of the things that were written about Jesus. Okay? That's what the Spirit's job is, and that's something that John himself is going to write about later on in this letter. And so if they had just stuck it out, if they had just been faithful and stayed with Him, they would have gained that knowledge and understanding that they were lacking with the uncertainty that they have there. And so, brethren, it may just be a matter of time. And this is something that we want to remind people of as well. It may just be a matter of time. Okay? Now, in today's age, you already know how it is. Whether in a marriage or in a relationship, they want the goods right then and there. They're not trying to wait. They're not trying to wait for anything. They're like, look, man, I want instant gratification. I want everything that I was promised right now. And in fact, a lot of times in this world, people want that gratification before they even make a covenant relationship with each other, right? People will be wanting that same thing with God too. Man, I can't, I'm just thinking about the promises of heaven and all of this stuff. Are you a Christian? No, but I'm just thinking about everything that God has said, and I just trust in Jesus. Are you a Christian? Well, no. And then they reject actually doing the right thing to be in a right relationship with God. And when they finally do that, they think that there's something wrong there. What's going on here? You and I have to understand that when it comes to these covenant relationships, no doubt that God takes these seriously, and you and I should take them seriously, but it's going to be done the right way. Okay? It's going to be done the right way. Now, looking at verse 65, in the context of what he's already been saying before, he says once more, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless this is granted him by my Father. They're having these misunderstandings. They don't have it. They haven't grasped it. God has not granted it to them yet to come to Him. They're having doubts. They've not gotten it yet. Though they are still called His disciples, there is work that needs to be done there. And again, they're not understanding that it's going to take time. Don't just think that these things are going to happen automatically. Don't think the moment you become a Christian, you're going to understand everything, and everything should be right in your heart about the Bible. This is what a lot of people expect. They're like, okay, so after I become a Christian, I can understand every question, right? I remember thinking that way too. When I first became a Christian, arrogantly thinking, okay, it was probably like maybe I had read the Bible through once or twice, and I'm all like, I'm ready, baby. I can handle anything. Give me anything, right? And so I went online and I looked up, atheist questions. So, questions that atheists have for Christians and whatnot. And I'm not going to lie, I can answer like the first 5. I was like, oh, well, I don't know. Sometimes that happens. But it was because I was thinking, well, I'm a Christian now. Yeah, and I've read through the Bible a couple of times. I got it down. I'm ready. No. Calm down. It's going to take some time. Be patient. Sometimes, a lot of times, that root of bitterness comes up because we're just not patient. We're just not patient. We're thinking, well, I want to know right now. I get it, me too. We all do. But as time goes on, in your relationship, you begin to appreciate God's wisdom and slowly helping you understand. It may not be something you appreciate now, but it is something you'll appreciate later. And brethren, this is something we want to tell people who are struggling. Who may be like, well, I've been thinking about this and I've got some struggles with this. Give them time. Tell them, hey, don't worry, just take some time. Okay? You'll understand why it was wise of God that you don't understand it now, but you'll understand it later. It's just one of those things. Something else we want to see in the midst of this, we understand and see that it is John, the apostle, who's writing this. One of the things that he brings out here is it seems that when these disciples turn away from Jesus, it's like a betrayal, right? It's like a betrayal. It's like, And one of the things he notes at the end of verse 64, he says, for Jesus knew from the beginning who those who did not believe, and who it was who would betray him. He's talking about Judas, right? And then you look at verse 70, at the end of verse 70, are you not the 12, and yet one of you is a devil? Look at verse 71. He spoke of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was going to betray him. There's something in the mind of John as he's writing this. He's thinking about Judas. As he's recalling and recounting this entire scenario when God fed these people and they found him on the other side, and then he talked with them some more and he was dealing with his disciples then, he remembered when a lot of them turned away from him, and it seemed like a betrayal to John. And no doubt it did seem like a betrayal. That's what they're doing. It's like, we're no longer going to follow you. And there's one particular person that kept coming to the mind of John here. That's Judas. It's like, man, he's talking about Judas. And I need y'all to recognize this is what Judas did as well. He might have had some uncertainty. He might have had some questions. But nevertheless, he turned away and he ultimately betrayed the Lord. But Jesus knew from the beginning. One of the things that John is doing here by bringing out Judas is helping you to recognize that you can, in some way, sort of understand a sort of similar situation if you're having doubts or if you're having questions. There's something about Judas we're not told. There's something about Judas that he's like, I might be hearing these things, but I may not be fully accepting them. And you can tell that because, of course, how he ends up acting later on. There's no way that you're actually going to betray Jesus if you believe that he's the Holy One of God. Oh, why would you do that? You're a Jew. You know the law. You know the word. You know the prophets. You know what they say about the Holy One of God. The Holy One of God, the Son of Man. You think you should betray that kind of person? There's something about Judas that's making him not have that deep in his heart enough that he might be telling people that, he might affirm that, but it doesn't seem like it's deep in his heart, because why did he do what he did? But I think what this also shows is that even if it's something you believe, even if it's something you trust in deep down in your heart, it doesn't matter if you are enticed away. If you're enticed by something to go away from God, it doesn't matter who Jesus is. Not because of the truth, but because of who you've made him to be. One of the things that you and I need to recognize, especially when it comes to guarding our hearts away from some sort of prenuptial agreement, some sort of insidious agreement with ourselves that I'm going to get out of here, but I might still have some of the blessings, or I'm going to just get out of here and, whatever. One of those things we want to keep in mind to warn and to keep our hearts away from that is to center our understandings, our beliefs around the truth and not around fleeting emotions. Center our faith, our beliefs around the truth, not around fleeting emotions. You can obviously tell that's what's going on here with these disciples. Well, the disciples who turn away from Jesus, they don't make the same commitment. They don't make the same confirmation that Peter does in verse 68. Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? What does he call him? He says, Lord. Lord, to whom shall we go? What else does he say? You have the words of eternal life. Like, are you kidding me? You're Lord. You have the words of eternal life. To whom shall we go? It doesn't matter if everything you say is also confusing, but you've given us the time to figure it out. I'm going to stick with you because you're Lord. You have the words of eternal life. This is something we've done, and we have believed and come to know that you are the Holy One of God. That's what Peter says. We have believed and come to know. How did you come to know? How did that happen? Did that happen in one day? Did that happen in 1 second? Did that happen in 1 week? Peter's been going with Jesus for a good while at this point. He's been interacting with Jesus for a good while at this point. He knows and he understands. This is how Jesus is talking about things. This is how he's describing things. I'm sticking with him. He came to know Jesus because he stuck with him. That's how. Now, there are a lot of people, as you know, it's like, well, I want to know right now. And if I don't have all of that knowledge now, then how am I going to get it later? But you have to remain faithful. This is something that we've got to continue to tell people and show them. It's through faithfulness that you gain this knowledge and this understanding. You may affirm it at the beginning and you may believe it, and that's good, but you need to come to the point where you know it. You know it. And you get to that point when you remain faithful. That's the only way how. At the beginning of any marriage, both spouses are espousing their love for each other. I love you, I love you, I love you. You love me, I love you, you know. But how do you know? How do you know? It takes time. Remaining faithful is how you know. It's not going to happen automatically. You're not just going to have all of this knowledge. Now, of course, anything can be shown to us just a few times before, but how do you know something? That is certain, that without a doubt, that's exactly what it is. You've got to take time. You've got to be faithful. This is why we need to center our faith around the truth and not fleeting emotions. Center your faith around the truth and not fleeting emotions. When we do that, we're doing a great job at making sure certain roots of bitterness are not coming up. And making sure we're not making this halfway agreement with ourselves to the side here and saying, you know what, I don't know about this. Spend some time in the Word. Spend some strong time with your brethren, your faithful brethren. Spend some time again looking at the life of Jesus, and spend some time walking in the way Jesus walked. Okay? And I think that's one of the most powerful ways that Jesus tells you this is how you're going to come to know me, is when you're my disciple. Being a disciple of Jesus means you're following after him. That's what that means. You're walking as he walked. You want to know more about him, about his character? You want to be more ingrained with God? Walk as Jesus walked. So go through these Gospels, look at how Jesus lived, take some of those things and do them yourself. And we can do them together. That's going to help you strengthen that relationship with the Lord. So you're not being distracted from all of the world that's telling you, well, you should doubt this and you should doubt that, you should doubt that. There's no room for doubt when you're spending all of your time walking faithfully. You understand? There's no room for doubt when we're spending all of our time walking faithfully. So don't spend time in anything that's going to take you away from God. Don't spend time in anything that's going to take you away from Jesus. Look at Galatians chapter 2 and verse 20. This verse here, I think, helps everyone to understand the nature of your covenant relationship with God through Christ. Paul says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So I'm not living, Christ is living in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith. Faith in who? In the Son of God. Who did what? Who loved me and gave himself for me. You want to ensure your heart against some sort of insidious type of situation, some root of bitterness. Be reminded of the covenant you established. And of course, we can often remind this of married couples as well when they're going through some struggles and they're going through something. One of the main things that they're taught to remember is their vows. Hey, you remember your vows there? You remember what you said earlier? Get back to that, right? Get back to what you said earlier. And often that helps people to remind them, oh yeah, that is what I said. Because when I'm looking at what I said earlier and the vows I made before God, and I'm looking at my actions now or my attitudes now, oh, it's not matching up. It's not matching up with the vows I made earlier. Brethren, this is something you need to understand here. This is what you understood when you came into Christ. It's no longer you who are living, it's Christ who is living in you. The life you live now, how are you to be living? By faith in the Son of God. By faith in the Son of God. Another good thing to remember is to remember the good things that God has done for you. And that's exactly what Paul is saying here. Remember, he has loved you. He loves you. And he gave himself for you. Okay? You did not get here without any sacrifice. You got here through the sacrifice of God's Son himself. So by remembering that covenant, brethren, you and I can do a great job at staving off any type of root of bitterness that may crop up in our hearts. And this is something, no doubt, that you and I want to be telling others as well. You want to know who God is. You want to experience his grace. You want to be saved by him. You've got to come through Jesus. I know the world wants to tell you that there are all of these other ways and different things to think about and these different things to do. But if you're talking about the same heaven I'm talking about, if you're talking about the same God I'm talking about, if you're talking about the same grace I'm talking about, there's only one way in which you're going to experience all of those and gain those. That's through Jesus the Christ. And that's what we tell people. You're not going to gain anything outside of him and away from him. It's only by your faith in Jesus can you actually ensure that you're going to come to know God, but also experience all of the graces that come with him. And so, brethren, as we've talked about spiritual prenup this morning, let's go back to these verses to help us to understand how we can stave off some of these roots of bitterness, get them far away from our hearts, and remind ourselves constantly of the covenant we've made with God through Jesus Christ and what he has done for us. He has died for us, so surely I can live for him. That's the plan. But as you know, my brethren, there are many things on this earth that are going to distract us away from Jesus, that are going to tell you you don't need to believe in him, that are going to try to get you to invite some type of bitterness against the Lord. Stave off those things. Be reminded not only of this lesson we talked about this morning, but again, go through those Gospels and live like Jesus. Stay away from any sense of doubt. Stay away from anything that's going to make your relationship look bad. You know, in any marriage or relationship, you don't want any of the spouses engaging in something that's going to bring disrespect to that marriage, that's going to bring disrespect to their union. How much more should we be staying away from the things that we know for sure will bring disrespect to our union with God through Christ? So let's make sure we're doing our due diligence at being as faithful as we can so we can be found before God in all confidence, having all faith and purity before him. But as we live on this earth, there are things that are going to get in the way. So my brethren, if there's anything that you know of that stands in the way of your walk with Christ, let it be known now as we stand and as we sing together.